Sex is an activity that we co-create together.
Today, we're talking with Dr. Kate Balestrieri, who is a licensed psychologist, certified sex therapist, certified sex addiction therapist, and PACT couples therapist. She is also the founder of Modern Intimacy, which focuses on mental health, relationships, and sexuality. Kate, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me on your show today. I'm really grateful to be here.
Thank you for being with us. So today we're going to be talking about libido. Could you define for our audience what libido is?
Sure. The terms libido and sex drive, or your sexual appetite, or your sexual, interest and energy behind that interest, your desire are terms that are really used pretty interchangeably. So, our libido or our drive for sex is typically motivated by a bunch of different things. It can be driven by our hormones, our levels of stress, learned behavior that we've sort of absorbed throughout our life, our brain and sort of neurobiological functioning. Sometimes different medical conditions or medications can have an impact on libido. So it's all sort of driven by, a lot of different things, including our emotional state.
Something that happens too, and I think this is an idea I would like to also talk about, is that this whole idea of mismatched libidos, and then maybe sometimes what can happen is that, you have a partner, long-term partner, and maybe tonight you don't feel like it, and the next night also you don't feel like it, right? And then maybe there can be this idea that maybe, you just don't have the same level of sex drive, but maybe it's just a matter of something external that's going on, like you were mentioning, like the stress, like the emotional state, maybe if they're sick or something like that.
I mean, different people have different baselines to their libido. So one person's baseline might be more intense than another person's, and that doesn't make either person's libido right or wrong, good or bad, more positive or more negative. But desire discrepancy can definitely interrupt couples' ability to kind of get on the same page. And with a little bit of open communication and transparency and collaboration, they can find solutions for that really allow them to work around where there are mismatched libidos or desire discrepancies. No two people have exactly the same libido, right? And it's sort of hard to expect that we would want to be sexual at exactly the same time as our partner every single time, right? We're not always hungry at the same time. We're not always sleepy at the same time. We don't always want to watch the same shows at the same time. So why would we want to have sex at the same time every time, right? We're diverse. And when we honor that, it frees us up from shame and fear so we can get more collaborative and problem solve more effectively.
I guess what you've just said applies in the context of a relationship that's already there and established. Mm-hmm. But there is also an idea that I personally feel or at least it sparks my curiosity, which is this idea of how mismatched libidos can be a deal breaker. Like if you meet somebody and you don't see them being, like as sexual as you maybe expected would like. But what are your thoughts on that? Does it have to be a deal breaker?
It doesn't have to be, but I think it depends on how the people in the relationship prioritize sex in terms of it being something that's really important to them. Some couples, it's not the most important element of their relationship. So a desire discrepancy may not signal as much of a fear response or a curiosity even. For some couples, sex is one of their biggest priorities. It's one of their most weighted needs. And if there's a huge discrepancy there and they can't find a way to work through that, then it could be a deal breaker. And again, I think if you bump into that, it's okay. And it's also really important to handle those conversations with care and respect for the fact that nobody's broken, bad, or wrong if they want more or less sex than you do.
And I have an interesting question here from someone from our team. And she asked, for those of us with sexual orientations that include multiple genders, is it normal to experience different libido with different genders?
It absolutely can be, right? Sexuality is so fluid, and some people will have stronger levels of desire and libido toward people who carry certain kinds of characteristics, and gender can be one of those characteristics that may elicit a stronger desire or a less strong desire.
And she also asked that similarly, maybe for polyamorous people, is it normal to also have experience different libidos with different partners?
Absolutely. The partners that we're with, or when we're having solo sex, all of that plays a role in how interested we are in being sexual. sexual. So we might meet up with somebody who has a similar kink that we have. And so that can increase our desire or increase libido. Whereas you might have really amazing sexual experiences with another partner, but you don't feel desire to be sexual in that way at the same level.
And then with this whole idea of having, different maybe libidos, I think there is also something very interesting to dive into, which is asexuality versus what low libido is. So I guess the first question would be, what's the difference? How do you know if you have one or the other?
That's a great question. First, I want to say that it's really for each person to define their own sexuality. So I'm not here telling people this particular definition fits for everyone, right? I just want to be really clear about that. But in general, people who identify as asexual tend to not really be interested about sex. I heard this great analogy, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but folks who are asexual, if we think about sex like akin to pizza or broccoli, it's not that they hate it, they just don't really care. They're like, meh, they might do it once in a while, but they're just not all that interested in it. I mean, maybe pizza's not the best analogy because many people love pizza, but broccoli.
Maybe broccoli.
Right. Somebody who has low desire might be like, oh, I usually love broccoli, but I'm just not interested lately. Yeah, maybe I'm sick of it, or maybe I'm just not in the mood for it right now, or my stomach's been hurting recently, and broccoli's just, I'm going to pass today. Right. So I think low libido really recognizes a shift. You recognize there are other periods of time when your libido has been higher and you've been really interested in being sexual, curious about it, engaging, enthusiastic, and now it's sort of lower. And folks who identify as asexual might have never or incredibly infrequently had those experiences. They might feel more apathy than anything else about being sexual, or indifference.
We've been talking about two specific gender like stereotypes or roles mainly.
Sure.
But before we move on to talk a little bit more about that, what are some maybe what's some advice that you would give to couples who are maybe struggling right now to, as you said, get on the same page when it comes to sex drive?
I mean, that sort of varies depending on the couple. But I think really creating time to speak with each other openly, honestly, really from a place of curiosity can get you a lot closer to finding a middle ground when you're not really sure why your desire is so discrepant, or what happened or what changed in your sex lives. But I also think it's really normal for couples to go through these ebbs and flows. And so when you start to separate your sex life from, being commentary on the quality of your relationship, and you start to think that, sex is an activity that we co-create together, I think people are a little bit more liberated to get back into that co-creation instead of feeling like, oh, we're not having as much sex as I would like, or I think we should have, or as we used to. So something must be terribly wrong. Not necessarily. You could just be going through a shift in your relationship that makes sense actually for where you are.
Do you have any thoughts, just like very quickly, on what the words could be? Because I feel like we all struggle a lot to find the right words to say something. So do you have
I mean, again, it so depends on the couple and the way that they communicate, and words that might be, words that are conducive to productive conversations might be different for one couple or another couple. True. But, starting with something like, I'd really love if we could set aside some time this week to talk about sex. Is there a time that's good for you? Can be a really gentle way to get the conversation going. And I come from a place of curiosity and collaboration being my primary goals when I'm talking with people about this. So, it really can sound like, what for you is the best outcome? What's your ideal frequency or kind of sex? Are you open to hearing mine? Okay, it looks like we're closer than maybe we thought, or, oh, we're further away than we thought. Again, using language that doesn't judge, doesn't shame, doesn't make you or me the enemy, right? Again, you're not good, bad, right, wrong, broken or not broken. You just have differences. And that is okay. And so when we stop making each other the enemy and start kind of trying to approach this from the same team, solutions are a lot more available.
Something that I like to ask too is that a lot of people, because maybe when they notice that they're struggling with this low libido, low desire, and maybe they're not yet talking to a sex therapist, right? And they're starting to explore some new things. Maybe, what are some things that you think people could explore to either to just maybe, challenge that feeling of, I'm feeling like I have a low sex drive, but I don't want to feel like this. And then maybe what can they do? Or what's that something new that they could do?
Well, they can always go online and get curious about other kinds of sexual experiences and activities that they can introduce into their relationship or into their sex life, and see if some novelty might kind of help increase libido and create some spark if you've been feeling a little bit of a lull. That can be a really great place and inexpensive place to start, because if it's a question of, I'm not really interested in everything, or maybe I've hit kind of a streak where everything feels too familiar, it's not doing it for me as much as it used to. Creating some newness and some novelty can be a great way to give your libido a boost if that's the underlying concern. If you're in a relationship, talking with your partner, clearing out resentments, improving your communication with each other. So important, because the quality of our relationship can absolutely impact our sense of trust, sense of safety, our sense of creativity and spark and joie de vivre with a partner. If there's a lot of unhealed hurts in a relationship, it can make it really challenging to feel super sexy or really interested in being sexual together. So, working on improving things that can be improved in your relationship is helpful. If you are partners who live together, and especially if you live together and have kids, really taking the time to talk about how you're managing the shared mental load of your household is really important, and the domestic labor and the emotional labor of the relationship. I think this is one of the most under-discussed conversations in couples, and one of the most frustrating and acted out when there are injustices or imbalances that can have a direct result on libido, because if one partner is doing more than their fair share and doesn't feel like their other partner is willing to take on some ownership of how to run their household together, that can be a really, really quick libido killer.
Well, Dr. Kate, thank you so much for being here with us. Is there anything that you want to let the audience know? Anything you want to maybe promote? Anything you're working on, or how can they find you or contact you if they want to work with you?
Sure. So my practice has clinicians in 5 different states. We're in New York, we're in Florida, Illinois, Colorado, and California, for folks who are looking for therapists, couples therapists, sex therapists, regular therapists. They can reach us at modernintimacy.com. And we have a bunch of blogs that are free, and they talk all about libido and different aspects of mental health, sexuality, and relationships. So feel free to jump on our website, as a free resource too. And on social media, they can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Dr. Kate Balestrieri. I think that's about it.